Now that we've installed PyCharm, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the functionality in the user interface. And there's a lot of it, but most of it you don't use very often and we won't need in this class. So I'm just going to stick to the most commonly used stuff. So let's start in the upper left-hand corner with this project tab. And you can open it and close it. Pretty much any of the tabs along the side here, you can click on them to open them or to close them. Same along the bottom. You can look at the terminal. You can look at Python packages. You can look at the Python console. When I clicked on that, I got a little security alert, but I'm going to allow access. And project tab is the same. So you can open or close the project tab, but what this gives you is basically a file explorer type view on your project folder. So the root folder that my project lives in is demo inside of PyCharm projects. Most of these things you can right click on to get additional functionality. So for example, I can select the project folder and right click. And because it's a folder, I have a bunch of different actions: cut, copy, paste, find usages. And for this one, I might want to refactor and rename, or I might want to copy the directory and paste it in somewhere else. Inside of the folder, I have my Python files. If I have multiple files, for example, I can right click on the folder, select new Python file, and type a name. So this will be my hello world file, and it automatically supplies a .py extension because I selected Python file. I could right click on this and I could refactor, rename it if I wanted to change the name, or I can just start typing in this editor window. Now, if you've used the virtual env option when you created the project, you'll see a venv folder in here. And once again, we'll be talking about that a little later, so stay tuned for that. Now, the next pane is this main text editor, and it has syntax highlighting. And I'm going to keep this short for now, but I'll take a look at a longer program when I show you how to use the debugger. So for now, I'm just going to create a function called hello world inside my Python file. And it's going to print hello world. And then I can run this by calling hello world at the bottom, like so. So these two lines of code are going to define a function called hello world, but not execute anything. And then when I get to this line, it actually runs the function named hello world, which is going to cause this code to execute. Now, to run this, I can right click on that and select run hello world. And it pops up the run window and shows me the output. So here's the command that got executed. And it's running the Python interpreter that I have configured for the project on this source file, which produces this output, and then the process exits with a return code of 0. Now, when I right-clicked on this and ran it, it actually created a run configuration and selected it here. So if I hit this little drop down, you'll see I have two run configurations currently. So there was this main run configuration that I started with that was part of the project template, use this main.py. And if I select that and hit this green arrow, it runs main. Or now I have a new run configuration called hello world. And I can select that and hit the green arrow and run that. So this is sometimes a cause of problems when you have multiple runnable things in a single project folder and you have one selected and you make some changes to a piece of code in a different file and you think that that's the one you're running, but you're actually configured to run this one. For example, if I go ahead and make some changes to here and hit the green arrow, I don't see any of those changes. So I'm going to say change this to Mark and run it, and it doesn't say hi Mark. And I don't know why, so I spend a lot of time trying to figure out why it's not executing. But really the problem is I'm not running main.py at all. I'm running hello world. If I want to run main.py, I can either select main.py and run it, or I can right click on main.py and run it from there. Either way works. So those are the main things that you're going to be interacting with. You're going to be using the File Explorer pane to select and open different files. You're going to be using the Editor pane to type in code. And then you're going to be running your code either using these buttons or right-clicking. And then you'll see your output here. You'll be doing debugging as well, and I'm going to show you that in a separate video. But let's take a quick look at some of the menus here. So there's a file menu where you can open a project, and you can also make a new project. So I'm going to open an existing project, and then you get a little file explorer that you can use to find your projects. So for example, under users, Mark, there should be a PyCharm projects in here. And then I have a list of different project folders. The ones with little black box and a line of white at the bottom, those have already been opened in one of the JetBrains IDEs, and so it knows that I can open this as a project. So here's a project that we're going to be building later in the course towards the end. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And I'll open it either in this window, replacing the project I currently have open, or in a new window. And now I have two separate projects open at the same time. So if I make this a little smaller, I can see that the old window with my Hello World project is still around. And I can switch back and forth by selecting which window I want to look in. So this is useful if I want to copy and paste code or so on. So here I have the project tab closed. I can open it. I can resize this a little bit because I don't need quite that much space. I have some run configuration set up, or I can just right click and run. Now this one, I don't have an interpreter configured for this project, maybe because I just cloned a Git repository with it. So I get edit configuration popping up instead of the program actually running. And if that ever happens, don't worry. You should see that under Python interpreter, it says no interpreter. So you can click the little drop down here, and you should see a list of interpreters you can choose. So these I have as virtual environments associated with some projects. You can tell because they all have venv in the path. This one's my global one that I have just in my app data local programs Python directory. So I'm going to select that. And now if I hit apply, I can go ahead and run it again and it'll work. Now, as long as you've installed Python correctly and you have Python in your path, you should see that project interpreter when you start up PyCharm. If you don't see it, you may need to configure a new interpreter, but the first thing to do is to check your path. Okay, that's what you need under the file menu, open, close, projects, and so on. There's a bunch of editing stuff in here that doesn't come up that often. Copy and paste is really useful. Another thing that's useful is if you select a range and type Control/, it will comment out that block. If it's already commented out and you type Control/, it will uncomment it. So that's really useful for commenting out a block of Python code. You can also, let's see what you have, view code refactor. We looked at the run menu. So you can run the currently selected run configuration, which is main. You can also debug the currently selected run configuration. You could attach to a running Python process. We won't be using that this term. If you have breakpoints set, you can toggle them. And then that's most of what we're going to be using actually. So not a lot from the menu. There's a version control menu that you can use with Git later on, but we won't worry about that. Windows useful for selecting a different window sometimes. So like so, I can switch back and forth between my open windows by selecting which one I want to show. And then there's a help menu. But usually I just Google what I'm looking for in help. So that should be enough to get started with PyCharm. We will have another video on debugging. And then I also want to show you how to run Python from the command line.